The restaurant was warm and bright that evening. Soft yellow lights rested on the wooden tables. Quiet music drifted through the room like an old memory. The kind of music people in their later years remember from long drives and slow Sunday mornings. Most of the guests were well dressed. Business people. Couples enjoying dinner. Friends speaking softly over wine. And then the door opened. Cold air slipped inside for a moment. A man stepped in. He looked around 65 years old. His beard was gray and tangled. His coat was worn and dusty. His hat looked like it had traveled through many winters. People noticed him immediately. Some looked away. Some whispered. A woman at a nearby table leaned toward her husband. "I think he came to the wrong place." But the man did not react. He simply walked slowly to an empty table near the window and sat down. His eyes moved quietly across the room, observing everything. The waitresses hesitated. One young man who worked there walked toward the manager. "Sir, maybe we should tell him this is a reservation restaurant." The manager was a tall man in his early 50s named Walter Hayes. Walter folded his arms and watched the stranger for a moment. Before he could speak, someone else had already begun walking toward the table. Her name was Lillian Carter. She was about 32. Calm eyes. A gentle face. Her dark hair tied neatly back. Her uniform clean and pressed. She had worked at the restaurant for 6 years. Customers trusted her. And the older guests especially liked her calm way of speaking. Lillian picked up a menu and approached the table. "Good evening, sir." Her voice was warm and steady. The men looked up slowly. For a moment their eyes met. Something quiet passed between them. Not pity. Not judgment. Just recognition that two human beings were sitting across from each other. "Good evening, miss." His voice was rough but polite. "Would you like to see the menu?" He nodded. "Yes, please." She placed the menu on the table. "Take your time, sir." Around them the restaurant continued buzzing softly. But many people kept glancing toward the table. Some curious. Some uncomfortable. After a few minutes Lillian returned. "Are you ready to order, sir?" The men closed the menu. "Yes. I would like the steak. Medium. And a glass of water." That was all. Several nearby guests raised their eyebrows. One man whispered, "Steak." Walter, the manager, walked closer and stood with his arms crossed. "Sir," he said carefully, "our steak is quite expensive." The older man looked at him calmly. "I understand." Walter stared at him for another moment. Then Lillian spoke gently. "That will be ready soon, sir." She wrote the order and walked toward the kitchen. Walter followed her. "Lillian, are you sure about this?" She looked at him quietly. He ordered food. "That is what we serve here." Walter sighed. "Just make sure he can pay." In the kitchen the chef raised his eyebrows when he saw the order. "Steak for the window table." Lillian nodded. "Yes." The steak began cooking. The smell filled the room. Rich and warm. Meanwhile the men sat silently. Watching people. Listening to quiet laughter and clinking glasses. His hands were rough. His coat torn. But his eyes were sharp. As if he had spent many years studying the world. After a while Lillian returned with the plate. The steak looked perfect. Golden and steaming. She placed it gently in front of him. "Here you go, sir. Enjoy your meal." The man looked at the plate. For a moment his eyes softened. "Thank you, miss." He began eating slowly. Not like someone starving. But like someone remembering something. Taking careful bites. Around him the room slowly relaxed again. Conversations returned. Time moved forward. A couple near the table quietly paid for their meal and left. Walter still watched from a distance. 20 minutes later the plate was empty. Lillian came back with the check. She placed it on the table. "Take your time, sir." The man reached into his coat. But instead of money he held a small card. He looked at Lillian again. May I ask your name? Lillian Carter. He nodded slowly. Miss Carter. You remind me of someone. She smiled gently. I hope that is a good thing. It is. He placed the card on the table. But before she picked it up, she quietly slipped something else beside it. A small folded note. Her hand moved quickly. Almost no one noticed. Except Walter. The man opened the check. Then he saw the folded paper. He looked at Lillian. She gave a small respectful nod. He opened the note. His eyes read the words slowly. For several seconds the restaurant felt strangely quiet. Even though people were still speaking. The man did not move. His hand trembled slightly. He read the note again. His expression changed. Not anger. Not surprise. Something deeper. Something that reached into the past. Finally he looked up at Lillian. His voice was softer now. How did you know? Lillian rested her hands together. My grandmother used to tell stories. Stories about a man who helped people quietly. A man who built shelters and schools without putting his name anywhere. She said he sometimes walked the world in simple clothes to see how people treated strangers. The man leaned back slowly. Walter stepped closer, now curious. Lillian continued gently. My grandmother once worked in a small shelter in Detroit. She said the man who funded it visited one winter night. He wore old clothes so nobody would treat him differently. But she recognized his eyes. The man at the table stared at her. Your grandmother. What was her name? Mary Carter. The old man closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again there was warmth there. Mary Carter. Yes, I remember her. She gave blankets to everyone even when supplies were low. Lillian nodded. She used to say something. Kindness is never wasted even when nobody is watching. The man looked down at the note again. The note read. I recognized you from the photo my grandmother kept in her Bible. She always said if you ever return someone should remind you that your kindness changed many lives. Walter suddenly looked confused. Wait, what is going on here? The older man slowly reached for the card he had placed on the table. He turned it so Walter could see. The card had a simple name. Harrison Cole. Walter froze. Everyone in the city knew that name. Harrison Cole was a billionaire investor known for funding hospitals, schools, and housing projects. But he was also known for disappearing from public life for long periods. Traveling quietly. Learning about the world without attention. Walter suddenly straightened his jacket. Sir, I had no idea. Harrison smiled faintly. That was the point. He looked back at Lillian. Your grandmother was right. Kindness should not depend on wealth or clothing. He reached into his coat again. This time he pulled out a small checkbook. Walter almost held his breath. Harrison wrote something slowly. Then he handed the check to Walter. For the restaurant staff. And for the community kitchen down the street. Walter looked at the number. His eyes widened. That amount could feed hundreds of families for months. But Harrison then turned back to Lillian. Your note stopped me cold, Miss Carter. Because sometimes even I forget why I started this journey. Money changes things. But it should never change the heart. Lillian smiled softly. My grandmother said something else too. She said the world becomes warmer every time someone chooses respect instead of judgment. Harrison nodded slowly. She was a wise woman. He stood from the table. People nearby were now watching openly. Not whispering anymore. Just curious. Before leaving, Harrison looked around the restaurant once more. Remember something, he said calmly. The true measure of a place is how it treats the person who looks like they have nothing. Because one day each of us will stand in that same place. Walter lowered his head slightly. Yes, sir. Harrison turned to Lillian. Thank you for reminding me of an old promise. And thank you for serving dinner with dignity. She replied gently. Everyone deserves a warm meal and respect. Even on an ordinary evening. Harrison placed a small tip on the table. Then he walked toward the door. The cold air returned for a moment as he stepped outside. But inside the restaurant something had changed. People spoke a little softer. Looked at each other a little differently. And Walter quietly placed a new note on the staff board later that night. Respect every guest. No exceptions. Because you never know whose story is sitting at the table. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness can stop a powerful man in his tracks. Just like a simple folded note did that evening. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the Black Voices. And tell us in the comments. Have you ever seen a small act of kindness change someone's life?